It's a pleasure for me to have here as a guest Ben Marmarelli. Ben, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ben Marmarelli. I'm an attorney, a civil rights attorney. I'm qualified in 2019, but I started doing work with Palestinian political prisoners since my internship, and even before my internship as a student. I worked for Avigdor Feldman. I did my internship with Avigdor Feldman. He's the most prominent human rights lawyer in Israel. Represented some most well-known Palestinian political prisoners, both as a hired attorney for Avigdor Feldman and also as a private attorney. Since I opened my practice in 2020, I represented some of the most well-known Palestinian political prisoners. And today I represent two. Probably one of the most well-known one is Marwan Barghouti, but I also represent another pretty well-known Palestinian political prisoner. Both are held under the IPS. Both have been sentenced in the second Intifada in 2002. And they are both being tortured right now in the IPS prison system. I claim is systematic torture by the IPS. I have reported on this both to
the IPS being the
Israeli IPS is the Israeli Prison Service. Israeli Prison Service is the IPS. That's the organization in charge of all civilian prisons in Israel. There are more prisons that are under the IDF, but my clients are both in prisons that are under the IPS, not the IDF.
So let me ask you. I mean, let's start with Barghouti, which probably is not only one of the most prominent figures, but it's also an extremely important keystone, or the keystone of a lot of what people think might be a future Palestinian project. Can you explain a bit of what his situation is, and in what kind of conditions he finds himself now?
Yes, as I reported, Marwan is serving in now he's in Megiddo prison. That's in the north of Israel. Since the 7th of October, he has been beaten by guards 7 times. Last time being in the 15th of September.
How old, just for context, how old is Marwan Barghouti today?
If I'm not mistaken, he's 62 now, I think. I'm sure you can find it online. I don't want to be. I think he's 62. He's been in prison since 2002. Now he's been sentenced to 5 life sentences for 5 killings. Of course, he didn't do any of the killings himself, but he was accused of being the one that gave the order for the killings. So he's been sentenced to 5 life imprisonments. So there is no chance of parole or anything like that. There's no chance of him getting out, other than in a hostage deal. Of course, in the latest hostage deal, Israel vetoed his release, so he wasn't released even in a deal. So there's not really a prospect of him being released.
Can you perhaps? I mean, I don't want to take an early detour, but can you explain what might be the consideration for which the Israelis did not want his release, even in exchange?
Well, of course, they don't publish the reasons why they vetoed him, but we can guess. I'm sure you can guess as well. They don't want to release a leader of the Palestinian society. They don't want the Palestinian society to be united, and this is, of course, they don't publish the reasons. Okay,
Clearly.
So we're guessing here, but I think it's a pretty reasonable guess that
So,
that's the reason. The
so
reason is they don't want.
Barghouti has been billed as the Mandela of Palestine. I mean, to a great degree, somebody that really does have good relations with just about every group. So I guess what you're referring to is the fear that he would be a really unstoppable unifying force if he's released into the political waters, so to say.
I'm sure that is the reason, but as I said, they don't publish the reasons. So
what are his conditions now?
now his conditions are similar to the conditions of all Palestinian political prisoners. You have to understand, since the 7th of October, there's been many changes in the situation or the conditions of the prisoners. First, the most important thing is all visitations have been stopped completely. Since the 7th of October, they didn't have any visitations. They didn't see any one of their families. Also, you have to understand they have no connection with the outside world at all. So there's no newspaper, no internet, no TV, no radio, no nothing, no internet, of course. And so they don't know what is going on outside. They don't know who is the prime minister. They don't know if the war is over. They don't know anything about the outside world. Their only connection, and that's not everybody, that's only the persons who actually have, the families have the money to pay for attorney's visits. Attorney's visits are very expensive because it takes a whole day to visit one prisoner, and it takes a whole day, so it's very costly to hire an attorney for an entire day to go visit your loved one. And the only connection...
Can I ask you, how expensive? If you
yes,
can give an idea.
It's about 2,000 shekels.
Which is in dollars or in...
I don't know, in dollars,
okay.
I guess $600 or something, or yeah.
For families that very often are really just working families, or
$600 just for one visit, just for one visit, for one prisoner. Yeah, not everybody can pay that amount, especially not every month or every 2 months, or So many prisoners don't have any visitations, not even by lawyers. The only person that can visit a Palestinian political prisoner is his lawyer. That's the only person that can visit him. And even to this visit, there are many limitations. The lawyers can't say everything, and they can't hear everything. They can't talk about everything. The lawyers are also being scrutinized. The conversations are being eavesdropped. The guards are in the room listening to the conversation. The conversation is being held on the phone through a glass wall. So there's no really direct contact and uninterrupted contact with the prisoner. Also, if you bring any documents, the guards will read the documents.
Is this part of the protocol? I mean, is this legal? Is there no client-attorney privileges?
It's not really legal, but you have to understand that the IPS is doing many illegal things, and the courts don't really stop them in any way. So no, it's supposed to have attorney-client privilege, but the IPS just don't care about that, and they do what they want in many areas. Like, it's not also under the Israeli law, it's not legal to torture prisoners, but all prisoners are being tortured by the IPS, and they're being beaten. Some of them are being raped by objects. My client, the other client, not Marwan, was being raped every time I came to visit him.
And in fact, you did mention to an interviewer that this client, who will remain nameless, was asking you at some point not to come visit him because he was actually afraid of rape.
The thing is, they try to limit the lawyer's visitation because, as I said, the lawyer's visit is the only connection the prisoner has with the outside world. And the IPS did everything to limit those visitations as well. they had many systems, many methods that they did that in during the 2.5 years. They had many different methods. In the beginning, they had methods like you would come to visit and then they would not let you in. They have you wait for hours and then tell you to go home. Or they say there's an emergency and you have to go home. You can't visit him today. Another method.
Even under those conditions, families would still be paying, presumably, because the lawyer has already been deployed.
I can give you one example that I gave the money back. So, the lawyers also suffer from this. I gave the money back because I felt sorry about taking the money and not even seeing the client. So I had a whole day's work just going down the drain, not getting paid. That's one incident I had in Ktsiot prison in 2024. Another method was, for example, I filed a request for a visit in May and got a date for the visit in October. 5 months delay in the visit. I filed a petition about that, and I did win in the petition. And the court said that you have to allow the visits as soon as possible. So ever since then, they set my visits very soon, like in 2 weeks. But as I later found out, every time I came to visit him, he was tortured. So, and then he asked me himself not to visit him anymore. So it's another method. The new method was, okay, we'll set the date, we'll give you we'll let you visit him as soon as possible. But every time you come to visit, we will torture him. And so he will ask you himself not to come. So this is
so in the case of your second client, these were sexual tortures or tortures of a sexual nature.
There are the torture is not just sexual. There are every time the lawyer came to visit, what they did is they took all the prisoners that have a lawyer's visit the same day, they put them in another cell where they would keep them in stress positions for the whole day. That means handcuffs in legs and hands behind their backs and on their knees for 10 hours. So that's a stress position. Now, every time they were being moved, they were beaten and also raped with objects. That's every time. Usually the beatings and rape and the torture, they are being committed usually during transfers when they are being moved. For example, from one side of the prison to another side of the prison, where they have the lawyer's visits is usually in a room, in a special room that is not near their cells. It's in another part of the prison. So when they have to move them, they take them out of their cells. That's when they beat them usually. That's when the beatings and the rape are being committed. And of course, also being put in stress position, it's also a part of the torture, not just the rape, not just the beatings. There are many forms of torture. Also, they secure the handcuffs very strongly, so they stop the blood circulation. Now, you have to understand, I saw this with my own eyes. Yes? I saw how the blood circulation is being stopped with these handcuffs. I saw boot prints on the back of my client. I saw bruises all over his body. I saw this with my own eyes. Also, I saw not just my client, but 3 prisoners. That same day I saw walking down the corridor, and all of them are walking as if they were just raped. So these are evidence that I saw with my own eyes. I gave this evidence to the court as well. The court said they will not discuss it. They will not discuss torture and rape.
How come? I mean, how does that make sense? How is this
not just one district judge, 2 district judges told me they will not discuss the torture and rape. They said they don't have an authority to discuss it because this is a matter for the police.
So it becomes essentially a jurisdictional discussion.
Yeah, what the courts are saying is that they don't have the means to check my allegations. They don't have the means to verify my allegations. So these are not allegations I can make to the courts. These are allegations I should make to the police. And the police have the means of verifying my information. The courts don't have the means to verify it, so they will not discuss it, and they don't want to hear about it. They basically told me, go to the police with this information, we don't want to hear about it. So they didn't discuss it in any of the rulings. They even, they were mad at me for even
bringing it up.
Even bringing it up, yes.
Can I ask, how many prisoners find themselves in these conditions in the Israeli prison?
About 10,000.
10,000. And this is actually the Israeli prison service, not the IDF. So this is basically, and perhaps you can both combined. So IDF, and so all of these children, about 900 children, I think it's the talk, being held prisoners. That is mostly within administrative detention in the context of the IDF. Is that correct?
Both IDF and IPS.
So the prisoners like Barghouti that are held by the Israeli prison service, they basically fall under the Ministry of Security, right? I mean, we have seen Ben-Gvir basically in the prisons and humiliating. I mean, there was an interaction, a very rough interaction, a very strange interaction between Ben-Gvir and Barghouti, humiliating Barghouti in his cell. Can you walk us a bit through how is this even possible? I mean, we are seeing basically Ben-Gvir doing a lot of circus work inside prisons in front of prisoners.
How is this possible? Many things are, maybe, but I don't know. Why do you think it's impossible? This is an apartheid state. This is an apartheid regime. They have a minister that is completely fascist, psychopathic, fascist minister. Nobody is stopping him. Nobody, it doesn't.
I suppose. Sorry for interrupting. I mean, I suppose that is part of the question, right? Part of the question is there are people like you, which presumably can see this with great clarity. There is a justice system which likes to trumpet itself as the only democracy in the Middle East, outside the gates. And I mean, we're not completely blind to what is happening because, in fact, we have people the ministry is broadcasting these images of Ben-Gvir, humiliating.
Yes, they don't even, this is the difference, I think, between the Zionist left and the Zionist right. That's the only difference. The only difference is if they try to hide their deeds from the international community. The right-wing Zionists, they do it with no shame. They broadcast it live to the entire international community. They say with clear words what they're going to do, and they do it. They're not hiding between under guises of respecting international law and human rights laws. They don't care. They say and do exactly what they believe in. And this is, of course, I think, credit. This is a good thing about the Zionist right, is that they don't hide their deeds. So hopefully in the future they will be prosecuted, hopefully, in international courts. So of course the Zionist left did many horrible things and still do believe in the horrible colonialist ideology. The only difference is that they hide and they mince their words and they use terms that are more easily listened to by the international community.
The question that I'm trying to ask has to do with probably a path forward. I mean, I think obviously quite naively, I mean, I accept that, but one must assume that somewhere in the legal system there are decent people that look at this and think this is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, we have basically a system of torture. We have now reported and evidenced rape. We have cases of,
The Israeli and mainstream Israeli society, that's the Zionists, have gotten full-on genocidal. So I don't agree with you. There are many people who think this is wrong, and even if there is, their voices are definitely being completely silenced, and they're afraid also to voice their opinions. They're afraid because there'll be a backlash against them. They'll say they support the terrorists, things like that, like they call me, supporting the terrorists, and you're against Israel, and so on. So even if there are, as you said, decent people, which I doubt there are, because they're all Zionists, and there are no decent Zionists. There is no such thing. So even if there are, they would be very afraid to voice their opinions.
How widespread do you reckon the question of torture, rape, stress positions, humiliation, essentially what we have seen and what has been reported, how widespread do you believe this to be?
It's extremely widespread. I doubt if there are places under the IPS or the IDF that torture is not being committed. Also, I didn't even mention the food source, the food shortages. They don't get enough food, and that's we see it in all prisons. In all prisoners, they don't get enough food. All Palestinian prisoners today are very thin. All of them are thin, including Marwan. If you look at the picture of Marwan from the media, it doesn't look like this today. Today he's very, very thin.
We saw that in the video that the Ben Gvir office.
And all of them are thin.
He looked very consumed.
There's not one that is not thin.
There was actually, I think that this is one of the first things I remember with Ben Gvir coming into the ministry, the conversation or the discussion, which as the circus show that he likes to put out. Was a central part, was a discussion about what prisoners should eat, and was quite literally a discussion about reducing their caloric intake.
Even the food that they're getting is really a low quality food, and sometimes with dirt in it or stuff like that. I don't know what they do with their food, but they get spoiled food, they get food that is not suitable, they don't get enough food. It's very humiliating. They don't have utensils. They don't have plates. They're eating on the floor from the empty boxes of food from yesterday. They use them as plates, and they eat with their hands on the floor with the empty boxes of food from yesterday. And they don't get enough.
I mean, I'm right now rereading Viktor Frankl's Man in Search of Meaning, where it's the discussion about the dehumanization, the process of the dehumanization in the context of the Holocaust. But I mean, the process of dehumanization, and it's to me, it's remarkable the fact that it's all these little things, right? Forcing somebody to eat from the floor, forcing somebody into a position which their humanity is no longer visible to themselves. And to think that this is something that these people have undergone. I mean, Marwan Barghouti, particularly, since we're talking about 24 years in prison, right? It's really
my other client is also 24 years.
It's simply remarkable. What are the medical conditions and the medical assistance that these people get, if at all, given what you described?
Now, there is maybe some difference between prison and prison and wing to wing. It differentiates with the wing commander and the prison commander. So it's not exactly the same everywhere. But, for example, with Barghouti, I can tell you that he did get medical treatment after the last beating in the September. He did get medical treatment. However, my other client said he didn't get any medical treatment for anything. He has many medical issues, and he's also always asking for pills and doctor, and he's never getting it. One time the guard said, "Talk to us after you're dead." He wanted an aspirin. He didn't get an aspirin. He doesn't get any medical treatment at all. For example, now he needs glasses. They don't get him glasses, and
What is that provokes these beatings, or is this just a matter of regular treatment? I mean, is there
regular treatment? No, regular treatment. As I said, usually in transfers For example, if they need to go to court, or if they need to go to another prison, or if they need to go to a different part of the prison, every time there is a transfer, there are beatings.
Which I imagine it's also the times at which the interactions with guards and so on increases.
Yes.
It's really just quite hard to fathom.
Because the rest of the time they're usually just in their cells, So the beatings only occur, of course, in the interactions. So.
What is your sense of the direction of travel of this? What do you think we are going to see? I mean, in the case of Barghouti, perhaps specifically, but more widely. I mean, do you see any end in sight to all of this?
Well, I don't know. It's possible that the government will change and maybe the next minister will be less horrible. It's possible. But with the way the society is going, I'm not sure that will happen. I don't know if there can be any minister that is worse than Ben-Gvir. Ben-Gvir is pretty much the worst thing that can happen. But as I said, it's not that the left-wing Zionists are much better than the right-wing Zionists. Maybe a little bit less torture. Still torture, of course, but maybe a little bit less. Maybe they will get more food. Maybe there will be a little less beatings.
Do you think that external pressure could achieve some of these changes? I mean,
yes, but there's none.
Governments are essentially just sitting by and looking on what.
They're not giving a green light to Israel to do what they want. No government, especially not from the West, is really doing anything, not for the prisoners, not for Palestine, not for anything against the apartheid regime. Quite the opposite. They all support Israel. They support Israel. They support Zionism. So I don't have big expectations from the international community. Of course, they are the only ones that can do something. So I hope they will.
What has been your own experience? I mean, you'd been vilified systematically. I think that, the insults and the attacks had been quite widespread and reported, actually. But how is the experience of being in the position you are in the legal system as well? I mean, because you're in principle trying to defend the democratic or at least supposed democratic pillars of the Israeli project, right?
I don't know if that's what I'm doing. I don't think there are any democratic pillars in Israel. Israel has always been in apartheid.
I mean, let me just say. I mean, okay, perhaps we can agree as to what is the nature of the state and its dealings. But your work is essentially work in favor of democracy. I don't know if you can be successful, but I mean,
my work is in favor of improving the conditions of the prisoners / hostages, the political prisoners, Palestinian political prisoners. I will do whatever I can do to improve their conditions. I'm not doing it under any thought that Israel is a democracy or was a democracy or there are any democratic pillars. I'm only trying to maneuver my way into improving the conditions in any means possible. I don't see myself as a guardian of the Israeli democracy. As I said, there was never an Israeli democracy. There's no such thing, and there can never be a democracy under colonial rule. It's not possible.
Can I ask you what has moved you? I mean, how did you end up in this place where you take up this fight?
I'm an anti-Zionist long before I became a lawyer. So I became a lawyer in order to do what I do, to do whatever I can.
Was there a moment in which things became clear to you as to what society you were growing up in, or
I guess the turning point was my first year in university when I studied sociology. Before I studied law, I studied sociology. And my first year in university, I had a very good professor. And under him, I really understood what is Zionism, what is colonialism. And ever since then, that was in 2008. Ever since then, I'm an anti-Zionist.
Is there, I mean, is there an anti-Zionism in Israel that you think could potentially one day become a political force that can actually bring change? Or is this something that you think it's completely beyond the question?
No, when you say Israel, you have to understand Israel is a state, a Zionist colonial project that rules on the entire land, territory between the river and the sea, including the West Bank and Gaza. Under this territory live 15 million people. 15 million people. Only 10 million of them have citizenship. But there are 5 million more that don't have citizenship, but they are definitely inhabitants of this land that is being controlled by this state apparatus that is called Israel. So, of course, if you just calculate the Jews, or if you just calculate the citizens of Israel, we are in a small minority. Although there are 2.2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, that most of them do agree with me. But if you count the entire Palestinian population between the river and the sea, we're talking about 7.5 million people. That's about half of the population. To that, you have to add about 8 million Palestinian refugees that live around the world and should have the right of return to this land. So, of course, if you just count the citizens, or if you just count the Jews, yes, I'm in a very small minority. But if you count the actual population, the actual inhabitants of this land, I'm not in a minority at all. About half of the population agrees with me. And if you include the Palestinian refugees, we're more than half, or about 2/3 or even more of the legitimate population of this land that agree with me. So, of course, under an apartheid regime, in South Africa, if you just count the whites, in South Africa, you say, it's a minority that opposes apartheid. But if you count all of the population, we're not a minority at all. Not in South Africa and not in Palestine.
It's really quite, I mean, it's really quite a shock, really. I mean, every time, I think even knowing the numbers, it's quite a shock to get a sense of the proportions, right? Get a sense of the fact that, yes, you do have essentially 5 million or thereabout people in Palestinians, but like a massive exile diaspora, a massive refugee problem of people that are really spread around the world. I mean, I come from Argentina. Chile, right next door, has the biggest Palestinian population in the world outside Palestine. And these are refugees now into generations. So it is really quite remarkable. I guess I don't want to take a lot more of your time, but I just want to ask you one last question. The little time we have left, do you have any sense of how the situation that has basically become a lot worse in Gaza? I mean, it has become catastrophic in Gaza and continues to deteriorate in the West Bank. Quite clearly adding a rather massive load of prisoners or hostages to the Israeli prison system by both IDF and the Israeli prison service. Is this in any way changing the dynamics, or is this in any way increasing the load of issues?
No, I don't see that it changes much.
Okay, so Ben Marmarelli, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time and like the thoughts. Of course, the doors are open, and as the story of Barghouti continues to develop, I might bother you again.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Have a very good day.